All right, Ken.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Bill told me I would get $1 a head for whoever was here, so my wife could count them up. That would be great. It would work out well for me. Yeah, I've been in this industry for quite a while, so let me just take a moment and tell you that I've been in the cable industry since the very early 1980s. I've been at I want to say, the epitome of all engineering operations. I am with NBC Sports Group today and have been for almost 8 years. Prior to that, I was with Comcast, which is still the same entity. Obviously, we just changed a little bit of titles and business cards from here and there. But it's been a great trip. And as part of this trip, one of the advantages that I've had, and I use that as an advantage, I've had the opportunity to spend the past 3-4 years at various times up in Asugi, Japan with Sony Corporation. And why are we doing that? It's not that we violate any business integrity. Sony Corporation is a major provider and sponsor for the Olympics, of which NBC is part of. As a matter of fact, Sony gives NBC about $16 million per the Olympics as a in-kind trade. They take it all back, of course, and they sell it as B stock. So when you see the Olympic items out there as B stock, you know that we've actually used it in our environment. But our relationship with them is so deep that I've had the chance to be very, very, very much hands-on, roll up your sleeves, ground level with some of my key engineering folks in their development. As a matter of fact, about 3 years ago, I think I was on a panel here where I talked about 3D. And I think on my left was Discovery, on my right was ESPN, and I talked about the fact that 3D is dead. And of course, you know, they were very active in 3D at the time, but I was very honest to what I thought from a programming perspective would be the applications of that. And lo and behold, 3D is great if you want to buy a game, but it's not so much today what you have from a programming side. And I certainly am not Nostradamus in that prediction. It's just that I was involved in the industry to see where that was going. Now, 4K, I will tell you this, 4K is here to stay. There's no doubt about it. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the approach from the production and the technical side. My presentation is very heavy from the engineering's point of view, so I'm going to kind of gloss over some of that because I know some of you in this room are here because you've seen a TV at Best Buy and you want to get one for this Christmas, and that isn't necessarily what you're here for. So I have a loop video, and on this loop video, this is not your Best Buy video. This is what we have produced at NBC Sports Golf Channel by ourselves and also in conjunction with Sony, the Sony Open for the past several years. We've been shooting in 4K, so you can get to see from a production value exactly what we're talking about. Pretty spectacular. Not your father's Oldsmobile. Looks good, huh? Like that? I'll talk over some of this so you can get some perspective, but what you have with 4K that you don't have in your normal 1080i or 1080p HD television is the depth of color. The high dynamic range on a 4K set is enormous. In addition to that, if you were up on this stage, you look at this screen right here, it is as resolute here as it is there. You can't do that with 1080 or you can't do that with an HD environment. The closer you get, and I'm going to lower this audio. This audio is typically what you get in the dentist chair for the root canal.
So nice.
So we've shot all of this for our original series called Big Break. For some of you that watch the Golf Channel, you've seen Big Break. That's Big Break, Myrtle Beach, as a matter of fact. So I've had our editing group put together a little bit of highlights, a little bit of sizzle, so you get a chance to see some of the production. So the high definition is one thing, which is certainly, as you see today, UHD, ultra high definition. I'll talk to you a little bit about what that is. This is true 4K, and then there's some other video on here that is your UHD, which is about 3,820 pixels, which is a touch different. What also makes 4K a very workable environment is that it typically is shot at a frame rate of 60 frames a second versus your traditional 2997 or 30. So your ability to do slow motion with incredible clarity is also present. So that's your ultra high definition 3840 by 2160. A little different than a true 4K, but consumer version. And there's a lot of reasons for that, which I'll talk to you about, and that's bit rate and bandwidth. And so 3800 is a usable format that you can stream with versus something that's much higher. So some of this content that you're going to see was a Sony Open. This was all shot in Hawaii. It was our people. Sony cameras were the F65s and the F5500 series. I think you can probably visualize or see that the difference in clarity between a 4K display, 4K content, just is enormously different than a standard high-definition display. So I'll let this play in the background. I'll turn the audio down, and I'll get into the meat and potatoes of what I want to talk about. So from the HD standpoint, there's so much to deal with. The UHD TV, which is the ultra high definition. If you lower the light, I would really appreciate it, only because I still want this to play in the background. Thank you so much. There's so many different aspects to what 4K is. The 4K cinema, there's certainly stereo, there's virtual reality aspect of this. The color space that I talked about is so deep, which is enormous. The frame rate, resolution, dynamic ranges, all of that is pretty big. So that's one important part. So just what is 4K? And if you could switch that for me, which is the next frame. What is 4K? So in the United States, we've moved into this new world. It's here to stay. But in Japan, 4K, that's old. It's 8K in Japan. And I know some of you will say, what do you mean it's 8K? It's 8K. It's 8K for a lot of reasons. First of all, the Japanese government helps subsidize a lot of that infrastructure, so it's not like cable operators and other providers here, which have to go out and raise their own capital to provide this. That's one aspect. The second thing is they are really big with fiber direct to the home, which is something that is coming down the road here from cable aspects. And once they can obviously get their return on investment worked out and get their delivery, which is what it takes. But to deliver 8K, oh my gosh, it's enormous. So what are we talking about? We're talking about 1 pixel versus 1 pixel in a 1080. And you can see from the PowerPoint display, you have from a 1080 HD signal, your standard high definition signal, that you've probably talked your wife or your husband into buying this HD set because it's beautiful. Certainly not this, but it's beautiful. But a 4K signal is 4 times that resolution. So when you go in to buy a set and Best Buy is trying to sell you and they're trying to say to you, but look, this is 4 times resolution. It's much more than that. Because those pixels are so small, so infinitely small, we have a distinct advantage in sports production in shooting 4K, even though it's only used in HD, and we'll talk about that. So if you can see this on your monitors out there, and these are 1080 monitors, so please don't confuse it with this resolution. The difference between an HD picture, which is over on your left side, versus a 4K picture is that difference in resolution. The difference between actually being able to see the eyelashes on someone. Now this creates all new sets of problems with talent in shooting that. I mean, talent like myself that is really excited about being part of the AARP program, when they were shot in HD, they were really concerned that their makeup was being done correctly. So in the production industry, we would call in people that would come in and actually airbrush faces because we had to have HD look. Today, I think talent's going to have to go to an auto body shop and get some work done, get some Bondo and sanded and be able to be out there because the resolution is that much different. No different than if you had a newspaper, Providence Journal, Boston Globe, the amount or number of dots per inch producing that photograph in the paper is the determination of how resolute that image is. And that's what you have on screen here. One of the aspects I talked about just a little bit, if you are too close to an HD set, a 1080p set, you have visible pixels. If you have a room here, go up and look at your TV up close, and you'll go, ugh, that's disgusting. Well, it's disgusting for a lot of different reasons. One is compression, one's bandwidth, which is all part of that. But the other side of it, it's a 1080 set. It's a 1080i HD set, so the closer you get to it, the lousier it looks, because you're starting to pick up all those imperfections, versus this right here, which is what you have as a 4K set. This is as resolute here, as I said, as it is there. Cinema quality experience. You can see much, much more wider in immersive viewing. Very, very important. Some of the screens that are being produced today, the curved screen, Samsung has that for an example. They make a curved 4K consumer screen. Very immersive viewing, because the 4K is much wider than a 1080 picture. So I'll blow through this a little bit, but you get a chance to see where the timeline is for all of this. Now, this timeline has no relevance to where the cable industry or direct-to-the-home satellite industry is in delivering content, but from an engineering and technical perspective, you need to know that timeline. So 2014-15, essentially the 4K UHD TVs came out. They're available in the marketplace. Everybody was ballyhooing them. They were lower price for Christmas last year. This year they'll probably drop even more, but you can buy a really nice 50-inch, 60-inch, 65, 70-inch UHD or 4K television for $3,000, $4,000 today. That's also part of the full HD, is what we call a 1080 set. That's the timeline. But in 2015 and 16, that changes a little bit. So in 2015 and 16, you're not going to see the manufacture of HD sets anymore. You're going to see the manufacture of 4K UHD sets that have HD capabilities or do up conversion. Why would an industry want to make two sets producing the same thing? For those that are in the production business, I assume some of you are sitting here, as a point of information, or if you're a manager or a senior manager responsible in approving dollars that are being submitted to you for requests for equipment, someone's going to come to you and say, we need to buy this, and it's going to, you're not going to buy a 4K camera or a 4K switcher. Why? Why is it put that way? Because the manufacturer isn't making an HD switcher or HD camera anymore at the professional level. They're making a 4K with HD capability, and if you want it to be 4K, you have to buy the license for it or the little dongle that slips inside. So keep that in mind. They're actually taking their manufacturing process. Monitors and TVs that you buy today will be multi-purpose 4K, also HD, and cameras, switchers, other technology in the production base will also be the same. And the big thing, the super high vision, 2020, this is the roadmap. And this not only is Sony's roadmap, but this is the industry's roadmap, is to have in essence, a super, not 4K, but a super high definition signal that has basically 7680 by 4320, which is an 8K signal. So even in this industry in the United States, you're going from 4K, 2016, 2015, to the potential of 8K, in a short period of time. That's a true roadmap. So what do we have for 4K technologies? There's a lot of different applications out here today. We have, obviously, the acquisition. From the acquisition standpoint, we have a 4K production camera. We have HD recorders, or 4K recorders. This little device right here, and Bill was asking me a little bit earlier, gee, what does that go for? This is the first, serial number 1, by the way. This is the first 4K player that's ever come out. Now, this is expensive today. Why? It's the first one. In the back room, we actually have a prototype of this that has no serial number. So as this was available for release for sale, Sony immediately got it out to Comcast, to NBC, to say, hey, don't use the prototype, use the actual one. Looks the same. One has a serial number, one doesn't. But this today, in the production world, is probably $8,000. And there's a recorder that's made today, probably $20,000. But obviously they're not tape, they're file-based format. And you can see from this PowerPoint, everything from an X1 Infinity box with 4K capability, through cinema, digital cinematography, through distribution, through displays. All of this is all part of this world, coming around the corner to a cable operator near you at some point in time. And for the home, you can see right there, we have the Xfinity box that's off on the side, the X1 services, all HDMI applications in delivering this content, 4K boards for computers today, 4K laptops they're manufacturing. These little devices called, iPhones, iPads, they're all 4K capable. You can actually shoot 4K video on a 6 or a 6S, in a 6 Plus. 6S obviously coming out in about another 60 days. But that right there, you can shoot 4K video on these. And the most important thing from the gaming world, which is where 3D still has applications, is the 4K device, consumer device. So, bandwidth. Let me get into the bandwidth discussion. We talked about at various dinners that I was part of over the past several days, what is this bandwidth question within the cable industry, the satellite industry, the Netflix industry, the other streaming push environments? Well, if you don't have the bandwidth right to the home, you have an issue. So I don't want to get into what the cable operators are doing. That's obviously their strategic vision down the road. But that's what you need. For UHD 4K, you need bandwidth that is, in essence, a waterfall versus a garden hose. And that's the important thing to keep in mind. So what do we have? Bandwidth requirements. If everyone here understands bit rate, this will be easy for me to get through, and I think it would. So a standard broadcast connection, a standard SD signal to the home requires about 0.5, a half of a megabit per second to produce that SD signal. Pretty easy. The recommended connection speed for broadband is 1.5 megabits. So if you had a half a megabit, you'd see a signal. You might see it a little blotchy. You might see some pixelization, but it's okay. But at 1.5 meg, not bad for a standard def signal. The recommended quality to have SD, 3 meg. I'm using this as a guide, and you'll see where we're going. The recommended quality for HD, which is what you would have delivered by your cable operator, satellite provider, et cetera, et cetera. And I have to be very generic because we're a network provider serving 120 million homes, which is both direct to satellite to home, as well as all of the cable providers in the industry. 5 megabits a second HD quality. So if you want to stream an HD signal to your home, 5 megabits. Now, that doesn't mean other compression algorithms by different cable companies can't make that different, because it can. There's a lot of different algorithm codecs that are being produced out there today to compress signal and get that delivered to your home. But the important thing to know is that to get an Ultra HD 4K signal, that 3840 pixels, delivered to your home today, I'm not talking through Comcast or otherwise of compression, takes 25 megabits. So no one's really come up with a distribution standard for this yet. 4K distribution to the home, I don't know where we're going to be. And again, taking the cable industry out of this, talking about the technical industry. The size of a 4K movie depends on so many different variables, including what the standards being used in 4K, the bit rate, and obviously the type of compression that's employed. Compression is putting 6 quarts in a 4-quart jar. It's pretty simple. Compression is unavoidable. In order to get this done, they use various algorithms. Don't want to bore you with some of this. But the difference between good and poor video quality is, in essence, a byproduct of the algorithm of that compression that's used. Uncompressed video bitrate of 4K UHD is approximately 12 gigabits per second. Now that is pretty startling if you understand the rate and obviously bandwidth, 12 gigabits. Not 12 megabits. When I had my first computer, which was a PC Junior made by IBM, my modem was, I think, a 12 kilobyte modem. To think about the fact that you're going to have a 12 gigabyte signal to deliver 4K to your home, that's enormous. Now, where does this present problems? For our industry, uncompressed 4K, where do we put it? So we've shot great video in the field. Oh, it's enormous. What do we put it on? It can't go on a turkey serving platter used in Thanksgiving. The technology of using LTO tape, which was something being used for years for a deep archive of video content and worked perfect in the world of HD, it's too small to put 4K on. So that's an issue. It's an issue for us as programmers, an issue for us as network providers. So we shoot it, file size is enormous, storage capacity is enormous, so our industry is evolving so quickly you can't even imagine. All of this is a bandwidth crunch. So let me give you a few examples of how we take this 4K signal, which not only we're using today, but most recently shot at the Super Bowl just a few months ago. I think a local team was in there and won. But if we could just go a little far, I know it wasn't the Miami Dolphins. I live in Florida, and trust me, I'm a Patriot fan. So a 100% 4K image, which is what I showed you a little bit, which is what you see or saw playing on this TV. What we use today is we call it pan and scan. So we can shoot a 4K production, but we know we're not delivering that 4K production to the home. So we can utilize this from a replay standard and pick out of that picture what we exactly want to show you at home without zooming in, which is an incredible feat. So the 200% 4K, which would be elongated, and the 400%, again, you see what happens to it. And an 800%. Now, there's a difference in, and I know this doesn't show it really well because we're on 1080 monitors out here, these two side monitors. But next one, please, next slide. But you can see what that looks like, a standard 4K signal, not zoomed in, panned and scanned. The camera operator's done nothing other than captured that entire field, to be able to cut out that segment to show the viewer. That's where 4K is so advantageous in the production world. I'm going to show you what it looks like in your high definition on the next slide. And so that's what you would see at high definition. Can you go back to slide on that? Possible? Not necessary. Oh, if you can, it'd be great. There you go. So that's the 4K. And the next slide, HD. This is, again, think in your head, you're not zooming in this picture. This is not a camera with a zoom lens. This is just basically what we call cutting and extracting out of a 4K picture for today's production environments. Okay, next slide. So what we do, if you're shooting a football game in 4K, we stitch this together. We can create an entirely stitched camera by using two 4K cameras and producing that field in that size. Now, what's the advantage of that? The advantage is a coach or the viewer can see every play in the action from that one look. Next slide.
Excuse me, Ken, do you
Yes,
think you'll be getting us to the end point here pretty soon?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, I pass away very, very soon.
We have to,
as a matter of fact.
we want to hear about Xfinity.
Okay, so if we can just go right to the end here a little bit. Thanks. That would mean, yeah, thank you. Look at that.
Oh.
Thank you. So,
Good
essentially
time.
what we're saying, 4K is here to stay, 8K, 16K on the horizon. This is an inevitable progression. Consumers are going to drive this. You're driving it by going to buy your TV. It's a more immersive entertainment experience. And obviously, the definition that what you see each and every year, you as a consumer, not as an operator, but you as a consumer wants more and more and more and more. So now that my meeting point is over, I thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you today.
Thank you, Ken. And congratulations for keeping the audience. Nobody left, but that gives a chance for Trevor to talk about Xfinity.